Accessibility Rating Framework, a simple way to compare accessibility quality across a portfolio of apps and websites. So, hey everyone, I'm Aidan Tierney. I'm in my kitchen live in Toronto, Canada, wearing the conference t-shirt that says Digital Equality, It's My Jam. Let's keep this conversation going on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, Aidan A11Y. That's AIDAN A11Y. We can have the hashcon, axcon for that. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. A shout out to anyone who is at this amazing conference and decided to go for a walk while they listen to my presentation, or make breakfast, or make dinner, or just have a little lie down. I hope you would take the liberty to just listen, because anything important I'm going to talk through, and it can maybe break up what will be an amazing but a long day at this wonderful conference. So again, my name is Aidan Tierney, and I work at TD Bank. I work as the Digital Accessibility Program Manager. There's a picture there on the slide, which is in fact the only picture in the whole presentation, of me in my kitchen making pizza. I started a hobby of trying to make pizza during the pandemic because the restaurants around couldn't go to. So anyone who's got pizza tips, let me know, because I'm really not that good at it, but I really love it. At TD, I work on a team. There's a team of 4 of us in total. And what we do is we support around 100 product teams to make applications that, or let's say digital content that goes into about dozens of apps and websites. And through that work, our team is supporting thousands of practitioners, whether they're designers, developers, quality engineers, maybe lawyers, vendor relations contacts, a whole wealth of people who have some interest in accessibility that we're supporting. And all of that comes together to make applications for millions of customers. I do want to make a shout out to the team with which that makes this all happen. Brian Moore, Brian Thompson, who's based in Falmouth in the US, in Maine, and Matt Del Bono, who's based in BC. So we're well-versed at remote work on our team. One point I want to make about the content that I'm about to take you through is it's not meant as a TD case study of what we did. It's going to be, I've put a lot of thought into hopefully making it something you can pick up and run with as a framework. However, if you have questions that are more specific to that, reach out to me, through Twitter, through LinkedIn, and then we can have a conversation more specific to TD. So the theme of what I'll be talking about is, can we communicate accessibility quality at scale in a better way than we're doing now, I think. So, if you think to the fact where our team is supporting thousands of practitioners, lots of different apps, the challenges there of explaining what quality is are quite large. Now, this idea of the framework that I'll take you through is based on ratings. And these ratings, in fact, I talked about at a conference in 2017. And the context of that was a little different. I have a sort of theory that you can rate the quality of a mobile app in 7 minutes. And if we think about it, a customer probably makes up their opinion of an app even quicker. So that rests on the ability to very quickly describe the quality. And that's what the ratings are. And so in the years since then, in the work, across our enterprise, we've explored how to broaden that to describe the quality of big websites, big apps that are in production. And hopefully, as you'll see as I take you through, you'll find it simple and intuitive if you're a non-specialist. If there are people on this in the presentation who are new to accessibility, welcome. And this is inspired by people like you who have an interest in accessibility and maybe asking questions to the accessibility team. Your questions have inspired, like, is there a better way to explain to just you? Now, of course, they're hoping there's also going to be program managers on the call and people who live and breathe accessibility as specialists. And what the framework does is allows you to compare all the various things that your portfolio has. And, in my view, there's not a lot of tools really to do that, or methods to allow us to compare very different things, a huge website and a tiny app, a website we make in the company, a website we buy from a provider. And for the specialists as well, it gives an interesting opportunity to set organizational goals or thresholds, and which I will be, spending some time taking you through. The quality that I'm talking about as well is considering what the user experience is, the customer experience, as well as any technical conformance, but not resting just on technical conformance. And of course, for me, the whole purpose of doing this is so that the organization that we work in can make better, more accessible content quicker. I would like you to imagine a website in the organization you work for, a really big website or a big app. And if nothing really seems to fit there, think of a company or an organization you used to work at, really big website. So I would like you to answer a question, but you only have two words that you can answer with, yes or no. Okay, so that's the constraint, yes or no. The question is that website WCAG compliant? Yes or no? Is the website or app WCAG compliant? Yes or no? Yes or no? Time's up. You have to decide. So this question is common when you're working in an accessibility team, and it's stressful. And as you maybe experienced, you maybe wanted to choose another word other than yes or no to describe, to answer the question. It sometimes makes me think, how could we describe it in tone or something, and this kind of question comes up. So I would often, back when we were in offices, I would be filling up my water bottle and an executive would see me and they'd, oh, how's it going, Aidan? Is such and such a website accessible, or is that website WCAG compliant? So the context of that question is they want a short answer and probably a definitive answer. There wasn't an invitation to like, oh, let me tell you about accessibility. It would come up in elevators as well. And so that's a very time limited moment when you're sometimes with someone quite senior in the organization. It's interesting that they recognize you and they ask about accessibility. The question can be stressful. Is it accessible? And I think sometimes, like, how do we say it otherwise? Is it accessible? No. Or is it accessible? No. Or is it accessible? No. Is it accessible? Yes. How often can we say that, right? So, it becomes a bit ridiculous that we only have those two words. What I sometimes want to say is you might often hear people say accessibility is a journey, so you would answer that in your elevator. Oh, it's on a journey. See how well that goes on. So these yes/no questions create confusion in an organization. In my view, because they're framed in a very particular way that talks about some standard and compliance, there's a big possibility that that's the only way people think about accessibility. If that question keeps getting asked, that becomes the accessibility question. So for those who are specialists, I think it's clear it's hard to say yes or no, because there's often some parts are good, some parts are not so good for accessibility. But imagine this. What if you had just talked to the test lead yesterday for that enormous website, and you had a meeting with the team, it so happened, and it turns out over 10,012 pages that they tested, there are no WCAG violations. It is perfectly compliant, conformant to the WCAG standard. And the team had they were practically dancing when they found that out, and you congratulated them. So then the next day you're in an elevator, you get asked, is it compliant? And you say, yes. What was going to happen after that? My speculation is the executive is going to be, wow, that's great. And then she'll walk out at her floor and probably never ask more questions about that website. It sounds an answer that is like, we made it, we reached it, we're end of job. And that's a real problem to tie the customer experience for millions of customers simply to one metric, compliance to conformance to a standard. So, and the WCAG standard, doesn't help us here from 2.0, but there's a lot of optimism for where 3.0 will go. But if you're not familiar with the conformance model, it says choose your scope, which I set in my question for you as the website. And then within that scope, if you're going to claim conformance, there, as it's sort of worded on the slide in WCAG speak, to conform to WCAG, you need to satisfy the success criteria. That is, there is no content which violates the success criteria. Gotta love that, right? But no content. So what that's saying is if you have a 10,012 page website and 10,011 pages totally conform, but there's a missing alternative text on one of those pages in the website, you cannot strictly say that you conform to that website. So the standard doesn't give us a lot of tools or techniques to describe the more real world situation where we're very close, but not, perfect. So enter the accessibility ratings, which I will take you through now, which will give us a few more ways to describe quality, but not too many. And they're based on star ratings. So these star ratings are around us everywhere. You want to have takeout, you choose a restaurant based maybe on how many stars it has. If you take rideshare, you're asked to rate the driver, and you're kind of a little bit concerned if you give too low a rating, they may lose their position in the rideshare. They're all around us, and what I've discovered is it's so intuitive. But in case, just to prove that, I'm going to take you through a little example. I'd like you to think of a hotel. Now, not just any hotel, but the best hotel you've ever stayed at. And if nothing comes to mind, imagine the best hotel you could ever stay at. If you like the beach, it's on the beach. If you like kind of exploring around town, it's in the best neighborhood, beautiful rooms, the staff greet you by name, wonderful hotel. So imagine now if we cross a threshold down to a 4-star hotel, what would that be like for you? I know for me, I used to do a lot of traveling with work, and which is consulting work, and which is where I met a lot of the wonderful people at DQ. And for me at that time, a 4-star hotel would be just like a nice hotel by the airport, with a nice breakfast. Nothing wrong with it, but everything was right about it. So it didn't have a beach. It, maybe wasn't in the great neighborhood. It was on the side of the highway, but for me, it met what I needed. Now, if we cross down to the threshold below, which would go into 3-star, I want you to think of a 3-star hotel experience. What might that be for you? And see if something comes to mind. And my thinking here is that once we're into these 3-star, something is taken away. It says, for example, a nice hotel, but it's on the side, beside it is a railway line, and in the middle of the night, the freight trains just barrel through all night long, and you can't sleep. Or it's a nice hotel, the staff are so friendly, but the walls are paper thin, and you can't sleep. So there's some good, some bad. And now I would like you to imagine the worst hotel you have ever stayed at. When I think of that, I somehow seem to think of trips when I was in high school down to South Carolina with my family. It's quite a drive from Toronto. It takes a few days, so we would stop along the way. And some of those roadside hotels were, I think what I would think of as traumatically unclean. Like there's things on the walls that just shouldn't be on walls. And it was something I really remember. So that's like the worst. And you might have your sense of where that is. So we've kind of created a scale there, but I'm not going to peg that at any number of stars. We'll come back to that. Now you're joining this and thinking, where's this going? I wanted to hear about websites and apps, and we'll be turning to that in just a moment. But before we do, I want you to think of your 5-star hotel. And I want you to think, that you've been there a few days, you've gone out in the morning, you come back to your room, and you walk in and it's beautifully been serviced by housekeeping. You walk into the bathroom and on the floor, on the black marble floor, there's a towel, a clean towel on the floor of the bathroom in your 5-star hotel. So my question to you is this now this moment of imperfection? Is this now making it a 4-star hotel? Or is it still a 5-star hotel for you, your favorite hotel, which happens to have some imperfection lying there on the bathroom floor? So we'll come back to that idea of whether we tolerate the imperfection or whether we cross the threshold. So I just wanted to spend a moment illustrating that, which I hope also reinforces how easily people take to thinking through the stars. So now, of course, we'll be turning to websites and apps. So the star ratings have 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, and 1-star. It's as simple as it gets. We could give names to that. We don't really need to, but we could say 5-star is awesome, 4-star is great, 3-star is meh, 2 stars is very poor. Now, 1-star, we're not going to say 1-star is extremely very poor. What we're going to do instead is a bit of a twist. The framework is going to reserve this to unknown. So at the 1-star level, it's not necessarily a reflection of poor or good quality. It's just unknown. Maybe that we haven't had a chance to review anything. And that could be the default rating. So it's very useful. I want to point out a couple other things. So at the 5-star level, we can say awesome, but not perfectly flawless. And that's important. So we cannot have a top level in this, in my view, that is expecting perfection, because if anyone works in software development and website content development, it's at the scale that we're operating, it's unrealistic to expect that products are absolutely flawless every day. Right? So we need to have some space for imperfection, tolerance for that, but we need to know, is it at a level that we tolerate, or does it drop it down through the threshold to a lower level? One other thing I want to point out on the slide is there's a line. This is the most graphical element of the presentation, probably. There's a yellow line between 4-star and 3-star. And that line is an important threshold. So in this framework, what it's signifying is that things above the line, so 4-star and 3-star, would be considered something that the organization feels proud enough to put out there. It's solid. Below the line is unacceptable. It doesn't have an acceptable level of quality. Now, you might wonder, well, why do we have a line and then 2 steps above it? Why not just say it's above the line and you're done? Well, this is something I would put down to human nature, or what I think of as product manager, product owner nature, which is do the minimum of effort to get the maximum result. And it's very likely, and that's a good thing. I mean, they're operating an excellent principle, I think. But what is very possible is that they will just do enough to get their product over the line into the 4-star, and they're done. So by having an extra level above that, that allows us to set excellence as the organization's goal and not just adequate. So hopefully that can be simple for a lot of people. Then in an elevator, we can get asked the question, is the website accessible? And I can answer, well, it's at the 4-star level. And if the executive is like, what's the 4-star level? I can then say, oh, well, compliance or somebody else, not accessibility team, has a new way of explaining quality, and it's that, and I'll send you something about that. This becomes a very handy way for people to talk about quality. For this to work, however, we have to define the levels of accessibility quite specifically. And that's going to be the work of, among others, the accessibility program team, but also other people who really live and breathe the requirements of your organization or the policies and those kind of things. So in a financial organization, it's going to include people in compliance, maybe risk, definitely in legal. If in your organization, those areas are less involved at the moment in day-to-day accessibility questions, maybe it starts with the accessibility team and then goes over to the others to review and to approve. Why it's so important of having a collaboration, and I'm so fortunate at TD to have that. So in TD, I work with, just to name a few people who have been instrumental in making this come to life, Bert Floyd, David Burrows, Lauren Kravetsky, Lori Peters, and others. They represent their specific areas, but they also bring an expertise in accessibility. So, experts in legal, experts in compliance for accessibility. What this then also brings as a part of improving the framework itself is a credibility. Because if it's just Aidan in an elevator telling an executive, oh, it's 4 stars, they'll be like, what the heck is that, right? But if it has the stamp of approval of, other areas in the business, it starts to take on a life of its own. So what you would hope to do is collect a small group of people and get a consensus with them about what information should we be looking at for a product, and then aligning it to say that it's 4-star, 5-star, whatever the star rating is. Now, we need this to be something that's information that's quite readily at hand. We're not going to go to a product and say, go do an audit and tell us something. No. It's just what information would they normally have, and we will account for the fact that they don't have it even in the ratings. So it's just a reporting exercise for the products. And this group is deciding what they need to report. And we're deciding on the thresholds. Now, if it's not clear, I just want to really stress the idea of this framework that I'm proposing is not to define for the whole of the internet what quality is. It's not that at all. It's meant as a very specific tool for an organization to talk better about accessibility in order to work quicker and faster and to create better products. And very much will be tied to the context of your organization. So let me show how you would tie that. What I'm going to do is go through 4 things that we could put into definitions. I won't go into all the details that are on these slides at the moment, but I'm then going to do another pass through with a more specific example. So we could ask for each product to give us an inventory of the screens or flows they have. So in that case of the 10,012 page website, a list of the pages. In the case of an app, sometimes pages or screens doesn't really make sense, and flows, the user can authenticate and then they can check their balance, whatever the app's main activities are. We can then put on this scale the amount of completion of what they provided, and we'll go through some examples of that. The other thing we can look at that's a little bit related to that is the testing coverage. So at the, how much of the website or the app was tested for accessibility. This can be very helpful to understand quality in 2 senses. If it has not been tested, we cannot make conclusions about quality. So that simplifies the activity of this rating a lot. We can rule out a lot of apps because they haven't been tested properly, or not said properly, haven't been tested. The other thing we can look at is when were they last tested? Because, as I think in Glenda's Sims presentation yesterday, she asked a question like, how long are the results valid? And it's like, sometimes while you're testing, they're no longer valid. Things are changing so much. So we could put a kind of timestamp on the results and say, like, when are they best by, best before, and put that on a range. We'll come back with an example. For the sites and apps that you do have test data, what we want to be doing here is looking at that from the context of users. Can they do the things that they're supposed to be, that the app and website is for? So it's If your issues are categorized by user impact at high and critical, then that's going to be a very simple task. If your high and critical are more just aligned to particular success criteria, you might need to do a bit of a pass through to see, are these affecting a user stopping? Are they a complete barrier or a partial barrier? And then we can, put those across the scale. An interesting thing that we can collect here, which is not technical really, is unresolved customer accessibility complaints. So this brings together two quite interesting concepts. So we get the feedback from customers, and in this case, complaints, but also we can measure how quickly does the product resolve those complaints. Because in a largely, in a widely used product, I don't think we can fault any product for having a complaint. It may actually be really helpful to get that complaint, so to make it better for everyone. But it's by combining the speed with which they fix it and the fact they had a complaint, it gives us a sense not only of the quality of the product, but also the product team, the culture of that team, perhaps, or the challenges they face with technology. So if we go through these four, possible definitions, we could look at a couple examples, maybe three, if there's time. So, and I didn't mention before, but all the values on these slides, they're just totally arbitrary. Like you just make them up yourself. So the values, are, for example, at 5 stars, we're going to say the inventory has to be 100% complete. So we know all of the screens and any related questions that we've asked the product about that. At the 4-star level, we could say, well, there's some tolerance for it. Not having all of that information, maybe we expect 90%, and then going down. But your group would decide, what is the best for your organization. So let's think of an example. Imagine a website that was built in 2011 as a marketing microsite, and it's a contest where you can win a ticket to a concert that happened in 2011. For reasons unknown, it's still it's still out there on the internet. Customers could go there. Potentially they do go there. It's still out there. So we find out, there's this website, we find out who the owner is, we go to them and we say, tell us about your website. How many screens does it have? And they'll be like, what website? I don't know that website. And we're like, well, your name is next to it. And they're like, well, yeah, that's an old website. I think we're going to get rid of that. So that's very valuable information that we have there for this framework, because it allows us to look in the definitions at how much. So they've basically given us zero information, and they know nothing about the pages that are there. So we can say, looking through the definitions, starting from the bottom, 1 star, 0 to 49%. Well, 0% fits there. Or maybe 1% will give it the benefit we know the homepage. So it's 1 star. This is where this framework really becomes efficient, because once we identify a good reason, and this is a clear reason why something is 1 star, we can stop. We can stop. So I've oversimplified it. Maybe the product owner comes back and checks it all, but maybe they don't know. Maybe they can't get behind the first screen for some reason. And it's really going to be a big owner's job to figure out what's there. We know it's 1 star, we can stop. We probably can ask the product owner those subsequent questions, but really the answers at this point don't matter. And so for the interest of time, we can leave that aside and we've rated it. Let's think of an app that was launched last month, and it's a really small app. All it does is something important, but it's very simple. It's an authentication app. So instead of getting a text message to do 2-factor authentication, when you put your password in, it asks you your phone number. Instead of that, it gives you an option to have a code come up on an app. So you might be familiar with some of these especially in work situations. So we go to the product owner, and and she says, yeah, I'll give you the inventory. Like, it's actually just take this, Confluence page, it's all there. And, there's 3 pages, or 3 main flows, I should say. And then we've got that full information. So that aligns with 5-star so far. So if we ask, tell us about your testing coverage, the product owner is like, oh, well, that's also there. Here's the Jira link. And we look through and see that they tested everything. So far it's tracking to 5 stars, because we've defined you need to have tested everything at 100% to be at the top level. Then we look through the issues that are in that repository, which usually is not too hard to do. You can do a filter and look at them quickly. And we see that there are no highs, there are no criticals. There's a few lows that they have put in a backlog to resolve later. So at this, we don't need to know anything about those issues. We have to trust that QA did their testing, that they are in fact lows. And then we can look here, well, where would that fit? So at 5-star, we can have no highs or criticals. So that seems to align with what we just found. So could be 5-star. Also 4-star, we might expect the same quality, but we've so far established everything else was 5-star. So we're still tracking at 5-star. Now, the fourth of these possible definitions is unresolved customer complaints. Well, it's just launched, so there's no complaints older than 6 months. So it looks like it's tracked everything to 5-star. So it's 5-star. So just briefly, I'll do one more. And let's imagine a kind of mixed app website that has some new pages and some really old legacy screens, which is, fairly large website. So if we ask for the inventory, product owner has a good sense of what's in the newer parts, but it's a little unclear about some of the pages from the 2010 era that are in the website. And it would be, there's no list of them, and it would, they would have to do a lot of work to just create an inventory. So let's say that puts it at around 75% of what their information that we would want to be comfortable to rate it. So that seems, if I look in my rating definitions, 5-star expected 100, 4-star 90, 3 stars 75. So it seems like we're tracked there. And so this aligns with 3-star. Going back to the product owner, ask, well, give us your test coverage. So all they test, it turns out, is some of the flows at the front of the website, the stuff that's new. So if we look here where this aligns, it's not 100%, it's not 80%, which is 4-star. It's core tasks and flows within the last 3 years, maybe. We go back to the product owner, or we check the documentation again. And in fact, some of that testing happened 4 years ago. Some happened more recently, but there's not everything even of the core information has been tested in the last 3 years for accessibility. So in fact, here we're not at we have to go down a notch to the 2-star, because we don't meet the criteria of core tasks and flows tested within 3 years. Can the users complete the core tasks? Well, it turns out in the results, there are some high issues that have been there. So we could look where this fits, but already we know that the best they can do is 2-star. So in the interest of time, I won't take you through that, because you can see, and this, this kind of skipping over things is what is useful. And it's what, how you actually will use the framework. Once you know, you can just kind of gloss over unresolved customer complaints. In fact, it turns out they do have customer complaints. And in fact, they don't even know how old they are. So if they don't know, then we can assume it's not in the last 6 months. It's older than that. But we really don't have to dwell too much on this in terms of deciding the rating, because we've already established the best it could be is 2-star. So we will call that 2-star. So that's kind of the flow, how someone might go through it. Now, what else could we put into the definitions? Well, automated scan results would be amazing. But the thing there is that you want to make sure you have enough applications running that across the portfolio to make the most use of that. Because you would definitely not want to penalize the products that use automated scanning, which are potentially, especially if they're older websites, finding issues. That's actually a good thing that they're using the scanning. So you'd want to find a way to factor that in. But that would be the ideal scenario, would be where all of the portfolio is running some kind of automated scanning, and then you put a metric from the scanning into the definitions. Age of issues can be really helpful if you have the ability to to pull that information. How long does a product take to fix an accessibility issue? Usability testing would be interesting to factor in, particularly in an organization where they're making a lot of progress with the basics. You could say at the 5-star level, you need to do usability testing once every year or 2 years, or whatever you name it. And then that means that those products that are just trying to get over the line, they really have to step up and go meet customers, whether virtually or not, and hear back, is it accessible really to them? External targeted audits is another area you could factor in as a kind of stretch goal at the 5-star level. This would be where you don't, it's not a regular audit where you would, do end-to-end check of everything, but it's just getting someone outside, like a specialist, to come in and say, look, just a few pages and see if that matches up with what the product is reporting. Because a lot of this information we're taking is self-reported, a bit like tax, right? Like you submit your tax, and then there's always the possibility someone will come in and check it. So having an external targeted audit would be an excellent way to really be sure that the self-reported information is accurate. So there are a few concepts that underpin the ratings. That you're doing a lot of testing is one of the main things, right? The more testing you're doing, the more efficient the testing is, such as automated testing. You're going to have better quality information coming in and easier to make good distinctions between the levels. Now, the important threshold is the 4-star threshold. So if we imagine a website is about to launch, brand new, it's what I would call the good to go. So if anything that is 4-star or 5-star gets thumbs up, it's ready to go, it meets what the organization needs. Anything else needs more work before it's ready to go. So what is so helpful here is if you get a genuine consensus and understanding from the different stakeholders as to what that looks like, and to explain in ways that product owners can see, what do they really need to meet? And so it cannot be, in my view, absolute perfection. And I found it interesting in Preeti's keynote talking about JT11, the idea, for those who caught that yesterday. So the idea being that rather than saying everything is required, hopefully maybe someone from DQ can better explain it than me, that the JT coming from Jim Thatcher 11, these 11 things that have been identified internally by the organization, those need to be met in order to go. And so that illustrates to some extent this concept where there's people have thought ahead of time, defined it, and say those are the things that you must do, but that's not absolute perfection. So the people who would assign the ratings initially need to be accessibility team, but once it gets kind of up and running, because it's just pulling in information, it doesn't necessarily need specialists to validate that. It could be a lot done more almost automatically, as long as the data is accurate. We need to communicate the definitions so that the product owners, so we're transparent. And the product owners need to understand that it's not an individual specialist who's going to make an opinion. So this is where it's not like the hotel. Like these ratings are, just aligning data with a definition, not an opinion from one tester. They're not a tester, and that's the key thing that I want to make it explicitly clear, the accessibility specialist doesn't even need to go to the website. They don't need to log in. They don't need to do anything. They're not testing. That would not scale. So then once that's all set up, and I'll be sort of shifting gears for questions in just a moment, we need to rate the portfolio. So the steps to that would be to find out what is in the portfolio. That's, maybe you'll take a chunk of it to start, go out and ask the product owners to provide the information. And then once you've collected it, before you can really start assigning ratings, what you're probably going to discover is that what seems like one website is actually made up of pieces that are owned by different groups. So, it could be something as customers sees one website, there's actually 12 product teams building it. That's not an exaggeration, could be more. So it's painstaking to go through that and figure it all out, but it's worth it, because if you want to improve quality, you have to get to the team, and you have to get to the owner of the product. And so if we can identify the pieces, then rate the pieces, then they have some benchmark to see if they can improve over time. Where next? Well, one of the things would be, what do you do with the low-rated applications? That's a subject of a whole other topic, really. Would be how does the organization move forward? One of the things that's going to come up is how often to do it again. And then what I would love to do, and then we'll turn it to questions just now, what I would love to do is be able to validate the thresholds with customers with disabilities and get a sense from them, what is it for you that makes something, drop from being awesome to just meh? What kinds of barriers, or what happens for that to happen? Or alternatively, what is it that makes a very good experience awesome? What are those little things that, that make it just a cut above? So I'll turn it back to Noah for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aidan. This was a tremendous presentation. I know personally, everything you just ran through, it was amazing. Lots of great questions in the Q&A. So thanks to everybody for the engagement. And I'm just going to run these down because they've kind of become stack ranked by popularity. So a question from Anonymous. Interesting you talk about the last time a test was completed. How often do you recommend doing testing? Is it every time a page or flow is updated, or only when major changes are completed on a page?
Yeah, that's something that I think, that kind of strategy you would hopefully set in your organization, if it's that cohesive. But the thing about this rating framework is it has to accommodate whatever you're doing right now. So it's not trying to set the ideal for how to develop accessible applications. So I think I'll kind of punt that question in the sense that you would find what you're doing now and then rate just to that. Trying to solve for the communication only and not all the good stuff underneath.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Control what you can control. Another question from Anonymous. I work at a 3,000 employee international company. We do not have an accessibility team like I hear some of the speakers state. There is one person who, among other responsibilities, manages to make sure development teams self-report a VPAT on their projects. What is typical for large companies? How can I pitch this idea to my management?
So I think what's typical at a large company is at a certain point, there'll be an accessibility team. At TD, there's actually multiple teams, and our team is focused entirely on the customer experience, the customer-facing large websites and apps. And I think, that if you can, I see companies even larger than 3,000 that don't have that role. And so that to me seems like getting executive buy-in that it's important enough to have one group look over it is a first start. But I think you could also use some of the concepts here, even without that, right? And maybe come at it a different way and say, like, we've discovered like a lot of the products haven't been tested. Is there a legal risk with that? Or we've discovered a lot of the products have complaints that haven't been resolved. It could, there might be ways into, have some leverage with others in the organization when you show a more simplified view of what's going on with accessibility.
Yeah, makes sense. Will WCAG 3.0 include any similar spirit kind of rating system? I thought I heard about that, but I'm not sure. So
I know there, yeah, I haven't looked at the latest draft that's out there. There's been a lot of discussion, and I've on the discussion board, and it's just like the best minds in the industry are working on that. I don't know where that'll end up, but I think they're definitely considering, two parts of this. One is how do we have good, very good, amazing, which maybe there'd be platinum, gold, or silver or something, but also how do we rate, or excuse me, test like a gigantic website, and when we know that we're not actually going to be able to test every screen, and is there a way to have a more unified agreement that certain targeted testing or template testing is acceptable? So both of those are needed in order to do that. I hope they come up with something that works, but also my hope is that none of it expects absolute perfection, because then we're left in the accessibility teams either glossing over, in that elevator, we're like, yeah, it conforms, and it's like wink, wink. There's some, lots of ARIA misuse and things, but it's an amazing experience. I hope they address that. That would be my biggest hope.
We've been getting this question a lot today. Where can I get one of those T-shirts? I can answer that one. So there will be a post-conference email survey, and if you fill out the survey, you'll be entered in a raffle. And I think we're giving away 1,000 or more T-shirts. So look out for that email. We'll probably take this as our last question. Should persona testing be used to determine an accessibility rating? So do you think, considering the different personas, kind of a vital part of this rating system?
I'm a big fan of testing early, and I do a lot of talking about testing wireframes for accessibility. I don't see that as fitting, because I think what we want to see is, I'm glad the question came in. My view is this framework is best approached from what is the customer actually seeing, which is, in production, if you like. We may not literally be testing production, but we're testing what the customer sees. And so all the great work that happens before is not necessarily relevant to that, because I've seen a lot of projects where they do all the work up front, and then in the end, it still has a lot of issues for customers. And then obviously most of the time it's the other way. Like they do up the work up front, and it's made it smooth sailing to a great experience. But I personally don't think that there's a lot of value in putting those kind of process things in here. But you may in your organization find that's an indicator of quality, and then why not add it? Yeah,
I love the kind of framework you've established here, being so context specific and what works best for you. I think that's great. Well, we are exactly at time. So thank you so much, Aidan Tierney, for your time and experience and wisdom. Thank you, Paula, for your ASL skills. You've been amazing. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your AXCON Day 2. Thank you very much.